Hello and welcome to my new session on my live blog. This week it's called From JavaScript to AL and Back. And what I'm going to talk about today is about how to connect JavaScript inside control add-ins and how to properly invoke AL and respond to any invocations. So you might ask, and welcome to apologize, I actually hear myself again on my live blog this week. Yeah, I apologize. This is I'm still struggling with this all this streaming software and everything. Yeah, at some point it will actually work properly. So without much ado, I would actually like to just go immediately into the code and show you some code that I've prepared. I said that this is going to be a live session with a lot of live code, but still I have prepared just a little bit to get us started. So what we have here is a simple control add-in. So it has 3 scripts, one style sheet which does nothing, some sizes, and then I have an event control add-in ready. It's something that you already know, and then one event and one procedure, and this is what I believe every control add-in should have, just these 2, or actually just these 3, and I will explain why only these. So then what I have is a page. Inside of this page I'm consuming this control add-in. I respond to control ready event, which will happen when JavaScript says I'm ready to start talking to you. This has already been explained on a lot of sessions and videos and blogs I did, so you should already know what onControlReady event is. And then I have this other trigger which is called onInvoke, which is simply responding to JavaScript invocation. So when I want to call from JavaScript to AL, I will invoke this onInvoke event. So I also have a startup script. This startup script invokes the extensibility method called onControlReady, and it passes no arguments because as you can see it doesn't have any arguments, and then it invokes initialize. Initialize is actually, I'm just going to switch these 2, so I'm going to first call initialize and then I'm going to call AL. And this initialize, it's a function inside my demo.js script file, and it does nothing. It simply creates a very simple user interface. It's going to be a button which says invoke AL. When you click that button, it will call this function called click, and it will again call this invoke extensibility method, and it will actually do something in the backend. What it will do is it will call this onInvoke trigger or event, and then my page will again trigger. So I have a trigger onInvoke. It will show a confirm dialog. That confirm dialog is just there to show that AL has stopped. So nothing is happening in AL at this stage. When I click or close this confirm dialog, I'm invoking the front end. I'm calling this onInvoke result, and then something will happen in JavaScript. So I don't have this onInvoke result. I'm actually going to just create this function right now. So function onInvoke result, and I'm going to do alert AL invokes onInvoke result. And one more thing that I have, once all of this AL code is completely processed, I will have this callback invoked, and it will show me this is JavaScript talking, AL is done now. So I'm actually just going to split this like this so that we can see what is what. And I'm going to format it. Actually, I don't need it like this. I'm just going to simplify it so that it's easier to actually follow. Okay, now I can run this control add-in. So I'm going to stop because I already had a debugger running. So all of this is now going to happen. I have my invoke AL button. What do you know? I'm ready. This comes from here. It's a message, and that's it. I'm now ready to click this OK button. When I click on invoke AL, it will invoke AL. Now AL will ask me this invoking confirmation. I will say yes, no, just to close it. And then it tells me that it invokes on invoke result. At this stage, I'm actually inside here. And next thing is I click OK here. And then control edit dialog is gone. It says, AL dialog is gone. It's the confirmation dialog. And it says this is JavaScript talking, AL is done now. So it indicates that AL stack is done. So what has happened here? Actually, let's not at all bother about what this control edit does. It's completely relevant for the demo and for the topic. I want to talk about this communication and execution and what is happening in AL, what is happening in JavaScript, and when. First of all, you need to understand that JavaScript and AL live in two separate worlds, quite literally. So JavaScript lives inside your browser, which is your script files executing inside of this shell here, which is just presenting the user interface of Business Central. But Business Logic and Business Central, all of AL, that is executing somewhere else. It's executing on the server, somewhere in the cloud. So they cannot run synchronously. So what is happening when, and I'm going back to my startup, when this is invoked, JavaScript actually starts executing, or actually continues executing, while AL is executing in the backend. So if you remember what it looked like, and I'm going to refresh your memory right now, when I start this, the button has appeared before this dialog. That's because that's how I intentionally organize my script. But if I stop all this and change this, AL will be invoked before JavaScript actually executes. So this is a fast machine, so I'm not sure if you will be able to see that, but I'm going to start once again. And then it was slightly different. Yeah, it's a fast machine, you cannot really see that. But the point was that AL has invoked, or actually JavaScript has invoked AL, and then it has started initializing. You could say, yes, that's because message is not really stopping an execution, and that would be true. But if I change this to confirm, so if not, or if confirm, then it will be exactly the same result. And as you can see, this has executed regardless that we haven't yet clicked yes. That's because JavaScript, when it invokes AL, it doesn't wait. It cannot wait. So in JavaScript, unless you do something very funky, and we're not going to go there, there is nothing that is waiting things. So you cannot really make JavaScript statement wait for something else. Except if it is a statement that itself is synchronous, and there are very few, like for example, alert is synchronous, so this would not happen before this alert is clicked. But if there is nothing that stops execution, this line would execute and then this one would execute immediately. There is nothing for you to wait. What we can do, and what Microsoft did very early on, is they allowed us to invoke a callback. So a function which is invoked when AL completes execution, when the entire call stack in AL is completed. So a callback is a function. So what I could do here is I could just add this, initialize inside. And as effect, this would have the initialization of user interface happening only after AL has fully completed its call stack. So I will run this again. Now, there is no user interface. I click yes, and there is user interface, because that's the point when AL has said, okay, I'm done with my call stack, and this callback function is being invoked. So let's take a look at arguments of this invoke extensibility method and what they are. So the first one is a trigger, or better yet, event name. And this must match event name inside of your control-it-in. So here you have control-it-in, and it says onControl-ready. And this onControl-ready actually responds to this invocation. So this is the event name. The second one is, actually, like this, arguments. And this is an array, apparently, of arguments that is going to be received by that event. So in this case, it's nothing. If I add arg1 text and then arg2 text, then I would have to provide those here. So I would have to say hello world. That would be how I provide arguments, but that's not what I want to do, not just yet. So I'm going to go back over here and remove this. The third argument is false. In this case, it is actually skipped, or sorry, skip if busy. I'm just going to write it like this. What does it mean? It means that if AL is actually busy executing some code, this event will not be called at all. And typically you want it at false, so you do not want to invoke something in AL. To skip invoking something in AL. You simply would have to wait. So if this is false and AL is executing something, then the runtime would schedule execution of this invocation until after current AL call stack is fully done. And then this event would fire. And then we have this callback. I'm just going to put this here. Callback is a function, and in my case, it calls this initialize function. I'm going to simplify that 2 times. First time, I'm going to do this. I'm going to use arrow syntax. This is just simplified syntax for functions. This would do exactly the same. But since I'm only invoking one single function, I can actually write this arrow function at 1 line. So I could say, yeah, this is how I would invoke. But since, again, this is just one function, this simply is a function that calls another function, I could just do this. So this initialize, now notice this. This is function invocation, and this is function reference. So I'm simply passing this function reference into it, and I'm just going to put this callback called when AL is fully completed. So I will stop and then run this once again. And yeah, you can see now that we don't have any user interface. I click yes, and it's there. So everything is executed as expected, and this was all fine. So what I dislike here is this function, this invoke extensibility method, because first, every time you call it, you have to write all of this very long method, where in fact you could make a mistake. There is no compile time check. A funny piece of information for you is that when Microsoft first released this framework, the method was actually called this, invoke extensibility method, not extensibility. And it was funny because nobody noticed. They even had examples with this, which worked. And it was just because they made a typo. So yeah, I don't like this very long name. That's the first thing. The second thing that I dislike here is that, this is written almost like, a lower level protocol. You do not want to communicate on that level. So you want some better control over all of these. Maybe you do not want this callback. Maybe you want to have better control over false. Maybe what if you want to ask AL to actually provide some result? And this is what I actually did. So I'm going to leave this one for now, and I'm going back into my demo.js. And here I can see that I have another invocation where I'm calling this onInvoke. And how I structured it is that I want this onInvoke to actually return a result. So this onInvoke is an event which receives one JSON object, which is called context. For now, I'm simply just going to change it into text because I want to demonstrate something very simple. And I'm also going to have onInvoke result as text. So when onInvoke happens, I'm going to change this to text, and I'm just going to invoke it with context plus, So I'm invoking with whatever context I received, I'm invoking it with hello plus that context and then just adding exclamation mark. So it's not much, it's a very simple one. From my JavaScript, I'm invoking AL, asking AL to do something and then send me the result back. And I want to receive that result in here. So onInvokeResult will receive result, and I'm just going to print this result out. And this result is actually going to be shown on screen. So again, I have to fix this. The invocation will just pass this vehicle. And I'm going to invoke it again. So let's take a look at what is happening. Running it again. Okay, ready. I'm going to get rid of this one, I don't need it. And then invoke AL, and then invoking yes, and it says hello Viego. So apparently AL has received something. It has sent that result of some processing back to JavaScript. But what I don't like here is the flow. And let's take a look at this flow. I have invoked the method from here, but I've received my response in here. And that's something that I really do not like. So typically, let's imagine this. Let's just call function AL. And I will have name, and then it will have a return, and then hello. And then I could do this. And if you don't immediately see what will happen, I will just show it. So I hate this. Okay. So I'm running it. Yes. Clicking this, and it says hello Viego. And why is that? That's because I had a function invocation here, and I have assigned a result of that function invocation. So now that I have done that, let's move this here. And I'm going to replace this with this. This is what I want. I want to call a function, and I want to store its result. And yeah, you don't have to be a rocket scientist to see that this will not work. So I'm going to run this. I'm going to click this, and then it says undefined. Why is that? That's because at this point, this method, this function, returns nothing. In JavaScript, nothing is undefined. So this res will be undefined by the time this executes. And you can see that nothing else is executing yet. So if I go back, see, AL is currently waiting because AL will be invoked at the end of current JavaScript call. Not immediately at this moment, but at the end. So if I click OK, now AL is invoked and I get this. So I click yes, and now I get this onInvoke result. The problem is I want this onInvoke result actually somewhere, you know, returning value to this. This is how I see any API. This is far too low level for my taste. So I'm going to start by actually step by step adding wrappers around this invoke extensibility method. That's why I have this lib here. This is a library, and I'm going to put my library method, which is going to be called get, or actually, yes, I'm just going to do this. Get AL method, and I will have name, and I will start with this. So this function will return a function which invokes AL for me. And then it will simply return function. And then from within here, I will do Microsoft.dynamics.nav.invoke extensibility method. And then I'm going to invoke this name. What with arguments? Well, I can do this. I can store my arguments using spread operator into the arguments variable or parameter, this now will be an array which contains all of arguments passed to this function. So I'm going to put it here. I'm going to invoke this. So what with skip if busy? Let's say that I want or actually let's just start with false. And let's completely omit this callback. So we know that we need one more argument here. Let's omit it for now. So let's now optimize by simply calling this one whenever we need a reference to a method that invokes AL. So I will start here in startup. I will say const and then ready is get AL method, and I'm going to call this. And then instead of this, I'm going to do ready. Okay. I'm not going to call initialize, or actually, yes, I am. I want to see that. Let's start from here. Okay, so what has happened? This ready has retrieved a function. And this function is this one. The function that will pass its arguments to that AL method which we requested. So this is called a closure in AL. So when you return, in JavaScript, when you return a function which references a parameter or variable from an outer scope. So this name belongs to getAL method, but we can reference it from this one because of this concept called closure. I recommend that you look up closure somewhere in JavaScript documentation. So by doing this, I have said, give me this method, and then I've simply invoked this method. This is, if you ask me, far better. Another thing that I would like to do is, let's say I want to pass a callback into this as a last argument. Well, that is, I could do that. I could do initialize, but then I have a problem. Then I have to do something with this simplicity over here. But let's think of something else that I can do here. So what I know is that this function returns nothing. So I can see that it also, this function here, doesn't have, or actually, sorry, this one, doesn't have a return value. So it will return undefined. How about me actually returning an interesting object in JavaScript, which is called a promise? A promise is an object which says, I'm going to do something that you asked me to do, and I'm going to do it asynchronously, and I promise to you, the caller, that I will call you when I'm done. So let's do that. So I'm going to do return new promise, and then I'm going to have an internal function which has one parameter. In this case, I'm going to call it resolve. And inside here, I'm going to put this. Okay. However, I'm going to use this resolve as callback. So what will this do? First, the caller, this place here, ready, it will invoke, it will actually currently have a return value. So when this, actually, what I could do is, I could do this. This result will not be undefined because ready function will return this new promise. What can I do with this new promise? Well, I don't need to store it in a variable. I'm just going to do ready dot, and you can see it tells me then. This then means when this is completed, then is going to be invoked. And then I can do initialize from here. So what I'm saying is that when you are ready, so whenever this ready is completed, then call initialize. And I can actually just run this now. Ready. And there it is. It has completed this initialization this time. Let me actually close all of these now because I have far too many of them. Okay, good. So that's the first step. So with this, I have been able to kind of synchronize invocations in a more JavaScript way, not like very low level callback way, which was how JavaScript was written 10, 15 years ago. So these promises allow us to actually kind of schedule calls. Say, when this happens, I want that something else to happen. So let's take a look at this demo now. I'm invoking this one. So at this stage, what I see is I want to replace this one with a reference. So I'm just going to say const invoke al is get al method on invoke. Perfect. And then instead of all this, I can do invoke al, and then I can pass Vieco as argument. I don't need to pass arrays because that's unnatural. If I know that this one receives one argument, then I can pass one argument. I don't need to create an array of arguments. And then I'm going to do then, and then I'm going to put this alert in there. I can get rid of all of this. And how far simpler this is right now. So let's take a look. I'm going to run this again. Actually, let me just get rid of this confirmation. I don't really need that. I apologize. You do not see me right now because of, yes, my camera has switched off out of battery. I apologize for that, but I'm not going to stop the screen. You can survive without my face. I'm actually just going to hide this from here. Yeah, sorry for this. We'll get better, I promise. I have a spare battery, just forgot to change it before the session. Anyway, let's take a look at what we have right now. I'm going to start this again. And when I click invoke al, yes, this is JavaScript talking. Al is done now. What did I do? So, yes, this is actually, of course, yeah, I cannot do this. This is what I have to do. This is a function invocation. So I'm showing this practically immediately. Let me actually just do this syntax here. Actually, if you cannot read that, I'm going to put function and then just like this. So let's run this again. Invoke al. Now cal is doing some, or sorry, al is doing some invoking. Yes. Now I get on invoke result, hello Vieco. I'll click OK, and then this is JavaScript talking, al is done. So far so good. I have in fact been able to at least somewhat synchronize calls without callbacks using this then behavior or functionality. But let's take a look at something else that promises bring to us, which is async await concept. So let's take a look at what async await allows us. In short, if you have a function that returns a promise and you want to invoke this function from here, you could do returns promise dot then, but what you could also do is make this function async and then call it with await returns promise. So let me get rid of this. Now that we know that we can use async await, what I can do is I can make this function click async function click, and then I can do await, and I can get rid of all of this then stuff. And now this is even simpler. So let's take a look again what is happening to this now that I have change this so there is no callback. This is just synchronously written code where I have this line and then this line. So this line should happen after everything else has already happened. So let's take a look. Invoke AL. First I get confirmation dialog. I click yes, I get on invoke result. And only then I get this, this is JavaScript talking alert. That's because this has awaited until this promise resolves. This is what async await does. In short, async await is nothing but syntax sugar for promises in JavaScript, and this is how you can use it. So let's improve this even further. What I want to do here is I want to make sure that I can do let result is this. And then what I want to do is I want to show this result. So how can I do that? How can I put this somehow into this? So, and that should be somewhat easy. So let's take a look at my lib here. So what we have is we have this function. I'm going to make some space here that we can see that this function is separate. So I'm returning this function, which is returning this promise. When is this resolve going to happen? It will happen at the very end after everything has been processed in AL already. Only then this happens. So it means that this will only be invoked after, sorry, I'm going to close this startup. I don't need it anymore. After this one has completed its execution. So what I need to be able to do is to handle this result somehow, somewhere in here, so that I'm able to pass the argument to this resolve function. So another thing that we need to understand is how does JavaScript framework know where to find a function which is declared like this? So we have a procedure called onInvokeResult. And when AL calls this onInvokeResult, what JavaScript framework will do is it will look in all of your scripts and it will look into global scope to see if it can find a function called like this. But again, runtime doesn't care how was this put into this global scope. And this is something that I will now show you what you can actually do. So I don't actually need to have this in there at all. I can go in here and I can somehow put this function into global scope. And how do I do that? Well, not like this, but one thing that you need to know, or another thing that you need to know, is that everything that is declared in global scope in JavaScript lives inside of the window object. So if I go and say window and then onInvokeResult equals function, and then I remove this, it has exactly the same effect. So what did I just do? I have declared a function and I have attached it to onInvokeResult inside my global scope, which means that when AL calls it, it will be there. And then it will actually invoke whatever happens in here. And so far, it has absolutely the same effect as previously, except that I will do something else. I'm going to create a variable. I'm going to call it let result. And here, I'm going to call resolve with that result. So here I have to do this. So I have turned this into a function. It's not function reference of this resolve anymore. It's now simply function invocation where I call resolve by passing this result, whatever it is. And here, I'm going to change this. And instead of this, I don't need it anymore. I will do result equals AL result. So what am I doing? I'm simply returning a new whenever this function is invoked. So when this function is invoked, I will await on its result. And then it will first declare a variable result. It will be undefined at this time. Then it will store this onInvokeResult global object in my global scope. It will be a function, and then it will return a new promise. And then next thing that we know is that this will happen. And then AL result, which comes from AL, I will assign it to my result. And since it's a variable from within my closure scope, we know that already from here, I can use it from here because this is happening after this happens. It means that this will have the value that I've just received from AL. So I will store this now, and then I will run this. And if everything happened correctly, this will just show me, okay, this is first, and then hello, Vieko. And there it is. So once again, what has happened? I have invoked this function. I have awaited on it. This function has returned a promise. And then this promise has been waiting. So this is not executing yet. It will execute only after this promise resolves. This promise will resolve when AL is done. Before AL is done, AL will invoke this onInvoke result. This onInvoke result will be captured in here. And then this onInvoke result will be stored in my variable, which I'm passing. So when I call resolve, it simply resolves the promise, calls its then method, or returns the result to the await keyword. So what happens here is that now this happens. And this result at this stage is whatever AL returned. In this case, this is hello, Vieko. So this is how we have simply turned a very unusable function from my view, like this, into something very powerful, something that we can even call synchronously, like this. So what we have seen here is that I can invoke AL and I can actually wait its result. I want to do a couple of more improvements in here. The first improvement I want to do is that I do not want this available at all times. I only want to be able to call this when a function is happening. So function is happening, I'm storing this, and then what I'm going to do here is not only I'm going to call this resolve, but I'm going to do delete window on invoke result. So what this will do is it will get rid of this function. You may or you may not want to do that. That's completely up to you. Right now it could seem a little bit dangerous, and honestly it is a tiny little bit dangerous, because if you have two ongoing calls, one of them might not trigger in here and you might not get what you want, but that's something that we can discuss in another topic. So what I wanted to show here is how I prefer wrapping Microsoft Dynamics Nav invoke extensibility method into a promise and a function handler. And when I want to talk to AL, I simply talk like this. You don't need to think from your JavaScript that this is some AL function happening. Another benefit of this is that by doing this, you can mock this. You can have the stability framework, which instead of doing this and invoking actual NAV, or sorry, it's not NAV, it's BC. I call it NAV because it's here. So simply what I'm going to do, what you can do in testability is you can really mock that and have this return something else, not something that calls AL, and you can have all of your JavaScript code fully testable without actually having to have AL session running in behind. Okay, that's as much as I want to show from JavaScript end. Now what I want to show from AL end is something that I always do with all of control add-ins, is that I want to add interfaces into this story. So let's create demo control.interface.al. And here I'm going to declare an interface, and I'm going to, sorry. So this is my interface. What do I want this interface for? Well, I want this interface for any functionality that is declared in my control.in. So what I will do is I'm going to copy these. And I'm going to change my event into procedure. Okay. The second thing, obviously, I want to have is a code unit. This code unit is code unit it's too long. I'm just going to remove this. And I'm going to add something in here. I'm going to add an implementation. So I'm going to say implements and then implements this interface. And of course, since it implements that interface, I will have to do this. Okay. So obviously I'm missing implementations. So I'm going to simply do like this. Cool. Another thing is that I want to have one other code unit, which is called demo logic.codeunit.al. This demo logic will be, in fact, executing everything that belongs to this control.in. This demo control.in is in here. Sorry, not control.in, but interface is in here simply to receive my or simply to wrap all of the calls that I make from the page, like this, into an actual interface. And we will see that in a short while. So let's actually go into this demo control.in AL, demo code unit AL, which implements it. Let's go into here and say procedure. I'm going to add another one, which is not an interface procedure. Initialize, and I'm going to pass user control. So I'm going to do I apologize. Control, and then it's user control.in, and then vlive demo. So what I'm doing is I'm passing a reference to my control.in, and I'm going to store it locally. Like this. And then when I want to do onInvoke result, I will do control.onInvoke result text. Okay, that's the first thing. The second thing is I'm going back to my page. Inside my page, I'm going to declare what did I call it? And when control.in is ready, or actually I can do at any point, but this is good enough, I will do control.initialize, and then I'm going to pass this curpage.demo into it. So what I'm doing here is I'm actually saying that I want my control code unit to hold a reference to this demo. I can also do this. I can do control now, and this will invoke the code unit. Okay. When I run this, it will have exactly the same behavior. And it all works exactly the same as it used to work before. However, this is not what I want to show to you. What I want to show to you is this logic, and then I'm going to use this one. And this one will have procedure initialize, which will receive handler, and this will be interface of my controller then. I'm going to store a reference to this in the same way. So I'm going to do handler is handler2. And then I'm going to copy this like this, and I'm going to call handler. From my page, I'm going to do this. I'm going to do code unit and I'm going to say logic.initialize, and I'm going to initialize it with my control code unit. Since this is an interface, when I go here, this will be stored inside my handler. And then I'm going to do logic instead of control. And then I'm going to run this. And everything looks exactly the same, except that from the backend view, it's completely different thing. It is something that you cannot compare with the previous state, because we have a concept here at work which is called inversion of control. So what is inversion of control? If you remember what this looked like originally, cur page.demo.invoke. Here I have very tight binding between my control add-in in the page and my AL code. And this makes both my AL code and my control add-in completely untestable, for one. So what I want to do is I want to invert the control in here. I want to say that I have an object, in this case it's logic. This logic object will be what handles my logic. And I'm going to call this onInvoke result on that logic object. That logic object will call this method on the handler object or interface. And this logic code unit doesn't care what handler really is. What it cares about is that it implements this interface, this control add-in interface, which describes the functionality of my control add-in. Which means that when my page calls logic, logic calls control, and control calls curpage.demo. But since I'm using this inversion of control pattern, it doesn't have to be control add-in. It can be anything else that implements this interface. And this is something that I want to talk about next week when we talk about inversion of control in the next Fun with Interfaces live blog session. So with this I end here, and now I'm going to move into Q&A part of this session. So let's take a look at, okay, first there is 14 of you. I didn't expect to have more today because we are conflicting with BC Tech Talk conference, but for now let's just first let me say thank you all who are here, who prefer this session to other two sessions which are currently running in parallel at BC Tech Talk. And let's take some question. So, no questions yet. I'm going to move it over here. Yes, this is something where I absolutely suck at, is triggering this discussion. So yeah, okay, job bluage. Abuse control it in to call a JavaScript function from AL without UI involved. Yes, this is something, yeah, I know that you would like to see that. This is something we will talk about once, not today. I cannot, unfortunately, spare time for that. But what I'm going to explain is, at least from theoretical angle, how you can achieve that. First of all, you need to host an invisible control it in somewhere in the role center. That somewhere can be a small part inside role center where you would simply hide this control it in. It would always be available. You would always be able to invoke it and send something to JavaScript. Then that control it in would have to store some reference to it which is accessible globally, so that from any page you could be able to invoke that. Then you would have to have some event-driven complex of code units where you would have to apply this interface pattern that I've shown today. You would have to store the reference to the control it in, and then you would have to be able to retrieve that reference from anywhere. So there would be a discovery event pattern at place where you would simply discover this current interface that handles the control it in, and then you would be able to talk to that interface. It could happen that your control it in is not in fact loaded in the role center, so it's not available. What you would have to do then is that your logic code unit would notice it's not initialized with an interface, so it would run a page in the background for you. I mean, that would look ugly inside Business Central, but that page would be there just temporarily until it performs its function, and then you close that page immediately after the function is completed. So this is how you can do that. There is no other way, at least not that I know of, that it's surefire going to happen. Unless, of course, you include this control it in absolutely every page there is, which I would advise not to. So, anyone of you who are still here, do you see any benefit of invoking AL the way I proposed today? Or do you think that calling Microsoft.dynamics.nav.invoke extensibility method is good enough for you? Well, okay, there is another. Bjarki Hall. Does the platform properly queue invoke extensibility method calls now? Do we still need to keep track of Microsoft Dynamics nav get environment on busy change, etc.? Well, in theory, all of them are queued up in the first in, first out manner. So it means that you do not really need to do anything in on busy changed. That I don't know, Bjarki, if you were at my Tech Days pre-conf a couple of years ago, where I have presented this. I've shown how you can really kill AL by simply just clogging it with a lot of calls from invoke extensibility method. And I tried to do that with Business Central 2019 wave 1, and I couldn't. So it means that they have fixed that. So it will not kill it. It will just queue up until, and it will invoke AL after existing AL call is done. So you don't need to manually synchronize yourself anymore. Okay, I'm going to call it a session now. Thanks everyone for participating. I hope this was useful as my other sessions, and you can read about this on my blog. I have actually blogged about this with some explanations, but I'm not sure if how easy to follow that is. So you can find this example, not exactly these objects with these names, but you can find all of this in my blog from November 2019. So thanks again, and see you next week in another session called Fun with Interfaces, where we're going to talk about some interface patterns, specifically about inversion of control pattern. Thanks, have a nice Friday, and now you can all enjoy BC Tech Talk. Bye-bye.